All right, Peter and Karen, we're down here. Riley's shooting video for us for a school project, which has been pretty fun. Her and Taylor helped me do the layout on the whole wine rack months and months ago when we were trying to figure that out, which was a challenge. We got the whole layout done back in October. The radiuses, I knew going into this project, these radius pieces were going to be the most challenging. But we figured it out. We got a pretty good system down. Chelsea, the girls, myself, my buddy Chris comes over on the weekends and helps us. We don't have Chris here today, but we'll have him on the weekend. And the biggest challenge is taking these 6x6 blocks. This is what we start out with, just a clean piece of 6x6 stock. No cracks in it, no checks. And we lay out a radius on it, and then we cut that radius piece on the bandsaw. And what I found was happening is the bandsaw will not cut a full 6-inch piece like this. It will go in about 2 inches and breaks the blade. So we broke a couple blades before we figured that out. And so what I ended up doing is I ended up buying some ripping blades, which are 3/4 of an inch wide, versus our radius blades that we used to cut these radiuses are only 1/4 inch wide. And I bought these big ripping blades and we started ripping these blocks in half. And this is where I created a ton of problems for myself. I'm a big beam guy. I've always worked with big wood, 8x8s, 10x10s, 10x12s. They don't move. You cut a 10x12 on Monday and you come back 6 months later and that cut's still the same. It's still square. It's still where it was when I cut it. What's happening with this vacuum kiln dried wood is when you vacuum kiln dry a piece of wood, it dries from the inside out. So when I grab a piece of stock like this, it looks perfect. And once I cut a radius out of it, like so, we expose these internal checks, which has created a ton of extra work that I never anticipated going into this project. And so what's happened is we get these checks in here, and you can see on this piece, I'll get up a little closer, the check was right here. And so we bought the 20-ton press, we bought this super awesome plastic wood weld glue, and a buddy of mine that builds conference room tables told me about this stuff, and we plastic glued the check, we put it in the 20-ton press. You can see right here that the glue held, but there's so much strain on the wood that it broke this piece, which didn't have a check in it initially. And so where we had ripped these 6x6s in half, you can see my rip mark, that was at one time perfect, as is this. This is a seam right here. You can't even see it, it's so tight. But there's so much tension on this vacuum kiln dried wood that when we cut it in half, we exposed that tension. And what it was doing as I would run a block through the bandsaw is I would get back to the last 2 inches of the cut, and there was so much tension on this piece of wood, it would literally pinch the blade and start burning. Brand new blades. I went through hundreds of blades ripping these 6x6 blocks down because there's so much tension in the wood. The wood is not that, the wood's hard, but the blades are meant for that. What the blades are not meant for is cutting through a piece of wood that is literally closing in on itself. So that created a whole nother issue. We worked around it. We bought a ton of clamps. We clamped these things, quadruple clamped them. At first I was only using a clamp at the end, clamp in the middle, clamp at the end. And when we unclamped them, they looked perfect, like this one. No separation at all. Well, what happens is these blocks were the ends of the 6x6 sticks. These 6x6 sticks are 12 feet long. So the 2 feet from the end and the 2 feet from the other end, almost no tension at all and no checking. Once I got into the middle of that 6x6, and I was told this when I talked to the sawmill about it originally cutting this order, for one, they had a really hard time sourcing black walnut trees big enough to get these kind of beams out of. Most furniture grade black walnut is what we call 8/4, 2 inches thick, a maximum of maybe 6 inches wide. Well, we're dealing with 6x6s, 12 feet long, and 2x12s, 12 feet long. So the pieces towards the ends of those sticks are flawless, beautiful material, zero checking, zero cracks. Once we get into the middle of those sticks, that's where a lot of this movement is happening on us that we've had to deal with, and it's added a ton of time. At the end of October, I seriously thought I could get this thing done by the end of the year. and running into all these issues with the wood moving is something I never foresaw. I'm not typically a furniture guy, and I look at this wine rack as a piece of furniture. And so I'm learning a lot. We've had to implement a lot of new tools, and I had a lot of timber framing tools, and now I have a lot of furniture building tools, thanks to you guys. So I just want to kind of run you through. I may have to do this video in several parts because at some point I'm going to need Chris's help. Once we get into fitting these radius pieces into the straight pieces, it's a two-man job. I don't have enough hands. So Chris usually comes in on Saturdays and sometimes on Sundays, and he'll help me hold things while I fit things together. But with all this movement in the wood, one thing that's happened is when I cut these radius pieces, everything came off the planer and off the table saw perfectly square. So this face that you see here was perfectly square. As this separation happens and this checking happens and the wood's continuing to dry and move, what it ends up doing is this once perfectly square face is no longer square because the wood is moving. It's curling one way or the other. And what we have to do to get a perfect grain match is we have to do what's called mirroring the pieces of wood. So when I cut that 6x6 block in half right here, I flip the other half of it back onto itself, and it gives us a perfect grain match right here in the center. That's awesome. But now we've got one piece of wood that's curling backwards and one piece of wood that curls forwards as it dries. It's wood. There's always going to be problems. You always run into challenges. And so what I figured out to fix this particular little issue right here is I make a fresh cut with my skill saw, and then anticipating further movement, we bought this little bastard. This thing scares the crap out of me. It's basically a chainsaw blade on a grinder that spins 10,000 RPMs. What this allows me to do is do a hollow grind in here. And so as I'm fitting a straight cut section into this radius section, instead of trying to take this handsaw and get a perfect miter, instead of having to saw through 2 inches of black walnut, I'm now only sawing through 1/4 of an inch and 1/4 of an inch. So it makes the fitment a whole lot easier. And I'm going to try to get some of that on video for you guys when we get Chris down here on Saturday, if he shows up. He's got a full-time job. Sometimes he has to work on Saturdays, so I anticipate getting him here for help, and I don't get him here for help. So we've been doing what we can without him, but now that we're into this fitment phase, I'm relying very heavily on him. And what Chris is doing for you guys, he's a body man. He's a paint and body guy. And so he's just got a really good eye and techniques for sanding. And so Chris is helping blend all this stuff, and I'll walk you through it. So I cut these pieces fat. We knew what our finished dimension was going to be, is 2 inches. So you can see here, I cut this piece 1/4 of an inch fat on the back side and the front side. He's already blended the back here. You can see it's perfectly smooth. He hasn't blended the front yet. And so I have to be careful working ahead of him. If I block him into where he can't get a sander in here, then he can't do his job. And we've run into that. So we had a lot of this assembled, and we had to tear it back apart because I blocked him from being able to sand it. Everything you see here is sanded and completely done, other than this piece, which I kept undone so I could show you in this video. We're going to make this video, of course, for a couple of days, so it'll be a little cut up, but that's what Riley's learning to do, and that's what she's helping me with, because I don't know how to do any of that stuff. I'm technologically inept. I know how to run a chainsaw and a skill saw and a bandsaw, but I don't know how to run a smartphone. So back here you can see there's 42 total radiuses. These are all of our finished radiuses. Some of these have been glued in the 20-ton press, which you can see over here, and some of them have not. Each piece sits in the 20-ton press after we put the Plasti-Weld glue in it. Each one of these sits in the 20-ton press for 48 hours. I was trying to rush them at first. The glue called for 24 hours, and even after gluing them with the Plasti-Weld glue, I was getting separation, as you can see here. So I had to quit rushing them, and I had to start leaving them in for 48 hours a piece. So some of these have been done, some of them haven't, but you can see in this piece right here, the mirrored grain. So cool. So the fitment just is very time consuming, and we're going to show you guys that. Hopefully we'll get Chris down here. I'm going to clean this setup, and we're going to reset to show you guys how the fitment process works. Here's Riley. She's super shy. All right, we're back down here in the shop. we're going to show you how the plastic glue process goes. Basically very messy, so I got some plastic on the floor here to catch the drips. This piece, you can see we got really bad separation at the joint. This is one that we glued up back in October, and the separation didn't actually happen until around Christmas. So a lot of these radiuses had sat around for a month and a half before we started seeing this separation happening. And I attribute that to just the wood was not dry when I got it, even though I paid for kiln dried wood. But what we're going to show you here is this is our Plasti-Weld wood glue, 5 parts powder to 2 parts water, which I already have in here. We had some friends over last night from, where's Sarah's mom from?
Pennsylvania.
Pennsylvania, and she was admiring the wine rack and the whole process, and she asked how many hours I had into it, and I have no clue. I don't really keep track of it in hours. I keep track of it in cigar butts. We have a 5-gallon bucket over by the door full of cigar butts. So we got to mix this really good. I did learn the hard way that warm water is not the way to go. The warmer the water, the faster the set time, and some of my batches that I mixed up were drying before I could even get the piece into the press. So basically just mixing this up till we get all the lumps out of it, kind of like gravy. Hardest thing about doing these videos for you guys is I spend more time cleaning the shop for the shoot than I do working, but otherwise I'm tripping over everything and I'm horrible about putting things away as I go, so I end up with just tools everywhere. When we started this project, I didn't have a lot of the tools that I needed, and so I got an account with the Mac tool truck. I wish I could say we're sponsored by DeWalt, but we're not. We just have a steep bill on the tool truck buying all these DeWalt tools, but they've made everything that we've needed to do this project so far. So now that we got this mixed up, I'll lay this down so we can drip through. We're going to get as much glue in these cracks as we can. See where it's running through the back. Rained last night, so it's very, very humid in here right now. If I start sweating, that's why. We had puttied this piece back around Christmas, but as it continued to dry, it looked great when Chelsea and the girls puttied them, and then all the putty fell out once the separation got wider. So I feel at this point these things have sat long enough. I haven't really been seeing a whole lot of movement the last couple of weeks. I come down here and check on this stuff every night. think we're pretty well dried out. So now that we've got a good amount of product in each one of these cracks, we're going to head over to the press. We'll pause it and we'll set up over there and you guys can see how the press works on this thing. Okay, so we got the piece in the press. Video might be a little shaky because we don't have anything to set the camera on. But you can see how good this thing works. Get in there on the crack real close so you can see it close up. Looks like that's about as closed up as it's gonna get on this one, so we closed up real good over here, but this side here is just not closing up. So what we'll do when we assemble this piece and put it into the rack, we'll flip that so it's down towards the back and our prettier side will be up towards the front where you'll see more of it visually. So this guy's gonna sit in here for 48 hours and we'll unclamp it on Saturday, sand it, and start fitting it.